You spend your 20s and 30s running a constant, exhausting calculus. Every career move, social interaction, and weekend plan is weighed and measured, driven by a quiet panic that if you don't optimize every single choice right now, you will permanently fall behind. This intense self-scrutiny leaves you replaying a stuttered sentence or a poorly timed joke from 3 days ago, convinced the people around you are still analyzing it. You skip the dance class because you might look foolish, and you hold off on doing what you actually enjoy until the conditions are flawless. When you are young, the horizon is so far away it appears stationary. You treat your years like a series of drafts you can always revise later, operating on the subconscious assumption that your time is a checking account that never hits zero. Because the hours feel effectively infinite, you spend them recklessly. You burn entire evenings doom scrolling, engaging in bitter arguments with strangers you'll never meet, and dragging out relationships that clearly ended a year ago. Talk to people in their 70s and 80s, however, and the math of life suddenly becomes brutal. They start counting backward. They realize they have maybe 20 good summers left, or 10 years with their own parents. The resource you treated as limitless turns out to be painfully finite. The exhausting effort to curate your early years turns out to be a massive miscalculation. You spend decades performing for a scoreboard that nobody else is actually looking at. The audience you spend your 20s performing for does not exist. You assume everyone is running a constant surveillance state on your outfits and your missteps, which keeps you from speaking up in meetings or taking creative risks. But older generations will tell you the truth. Everyone in that room was entirely consumed by their own private anxieties. Nobody had the bandwidth to track you. They forgot about your awkward joke before they reached the parking lot. You are the only inmate in a locked facility of your own making. This same performative instinct bleeds into how we choose our partners. We prioritize chemistry, intensity, and the way someone makes us feel seen in the moment. But 20 years in, that intensity is physically exhausting to maintain. The marriages that actually endure 4 decades aren't sustained by constant fireworks. They survive because 2 people genuinely like talking to each other on a slow Tuesday. They rely on an easy, unforced friendship, where silences feel comfortable and nobody has to put on a show. When you walk out of the cell of constant judgment, you stop chasing exhausting highs. You pick the person you actually enjoy being bored with and build a connection that regenerates its own fuel. We've engineered our days to avoid ever sitting in a quiet room. The phone is in your hand before you're fully awake, and you can't walk to the grocery store or drive down the street without a podcast pumping into your ears to drown out your own thoughts. Constant noise creates a slow disaster for your judgment. When you can't tolerate being alone with yourself, you end up outsourcing your biggest life decisions to whoever happens to be standing nearest. You stay in the wrong job or the wrong friend group simply because the alternative is temporary silence. You spend your prime years getting very good at a job you never really chose, optimizing for a destination that doesn't actually suit you. It results in a quiet realization at midlife that these achievements don't feel like yours. You've successfully completed someone else's wish list. We naturally look for the massive breakthrough or the dramatic transformation to fix our path. But the people who make it to 70 healthy, solvent, and sane relied on an incredibly mundane approach. They built extraordinary lives through entirely unsexy habits. They saved a little bit, trained a little bit, and got enough sleep. They aggressively protected a boring Tuesday, and a Wednesday, and a Thursday, repeating those tiny actions for 40 years until their retirement accounts and their marriages compounded into something massive. Financial wealth plays a very specific role in this routine. The number in the bank arrives, but the calm doesn't. An anxious person just becomes a wealthy anxious person. What money actually provides is the pure freedom to handle an emergency or walk out of a bad job without panic. Long-term success isn't about dramatic leaps. It's about cultivating enough quiet time to ensure your small daily steps are actually moving toward a destination you want to inhabit. Right now, your body tolerates almost anything. You eat garbage, sleep 4 hours, skip the gym, and bounce back by noon. You treat your physical health like a permanent trait, when in reality, it's a high-interest credit line that you're maxing out without reading the terms and conditions. The physical ledger keeps perfect records. Every ignored warning sign and chronic stressor sits quietly for decades. Then the bill arrives 20 years late. The version of your body at 65 is actively being designed right now by someone who isn't paying attention. There is a parallel delusion in how we treat our families. We assume there is always going to be next Christmas, another visit, or a future calm moment to finally have those meaningful conversations with our aging parents. Then suddenly one of them gets sick. You become the oldest generation overnight. Older people who have lost their parents will tell you the sharpest grief doesn't stem from massive conflicts. It's the profound regret of never asking about their childhood or failing to write down a simple recipe. The exact way to avoid these specific regrets is intensely practical. Lift weights to protect your joints. Treat your sleep schedule like a professional obligation. And call your parents when absolutely nothing is wrong, just to record their voice telling a story. The energy you have to travel, the absence of chronic pain, and the family history you carry forward are entirely downstream of these minor systems. Your late life is being permanently locked into place by the mundane things you are choosing to ignore today. The single mathematical law governing all of this elder wisdom is compound interest. Your skills, your friendships, your reading habits, and your worst physical choices all compound with exact, merciless precision. The danger of compounding is that it requires you to operate on blind faith. For the first 5 or 10 years, the curve is completely flat. Going to the gym or saving a tiny amount each month feels like completely wasted effort. The people you envy at age 60 aren't unusually lucky. They simply refuse to break the chain. They kept executing the small tasks until year 10, when the math finally took over and the results went completely vertical. Understanding this math exposes the most brutal regret of aging, the perpetual habit of postponing your own joy. We convince ourselves that we will enjoy our lives later, once the timing is better, the finances are settled, or the kids are older. The right time is a story we tell ourselves to justify deferring the present. The people who saved their expensive wine for a perfect occasion ended up leaving unopened bottles for their kids to clear out after the funeral. The massive trips they planned for retirement were permanently canceled because their knees gave out before the calendar cleared up. There is no future moment of perfect arrival. The 40 years you spend preparing to live your life is the actual life itself. Stop waiting for the stars to align. Take the messy trip, wear the nice clothes on a random Wednesday, and realize that the freedom you are waiting for already exists.